Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our last webinar of the Resilient Job Seeker series. Thank you so much for joining us. So to begin, as with always, I would like to thank the government or the province of Alberta with the Government of Canada for sponsoring this webinar, and they provide employment support programs and services for job seekers. I'd also like to thank Compound XP, our technology provider, and the support that they provide and all of the magic that they do behind the scenes. And also the fabulous talent pool team that made this event happen. So if you're new to the series and you haven't attended previously, I want to share the process for today's events. We would encourage you to ask questions, which we will share with the presenter at the end of her presentation. And you'll notice a box on your screen that says type your question, and it's as easy as that. Since we're unable to see you or hear you, that's the best way for you to be involved in this webinar. We do have a draw once again for a gift card, and we will ask you a question at the end of this webinar, and you will be asked to put your answer in, your email, your name, and then we will let the lucky winner know by email if they have, when they have won. Talent Pool has developed a very comprehensive list of mental health resources available to job seekers. I've mentioned this in previous events, but I just want you to know it's a really great resource. You can download it if you go to the Talent Pool webinar resource page. And I think in these trying times, it's really beneficial for us and our family and friends to know that there are resources and services out there that can help us. Certainly, you know, for today's webinar, we will be having a link in the little Slido box for the resource called Stretch Your Dollars Budgeting Basic Workbook. And that will help you figure out as you go along how you might be able to prepare yourself for this very trying time. Our presenter said to me earlier, talking about how do we prepare for the financial pandemic that's coming. And certainly, you know, that's something that we're going to discuss today around how do we help ourselves manage our money when we don't necessarily have a fixed income coming in. So Money Mentors provides financial tips, resources for dealing with unemployment. It also provides budgeting, managing debt information, all kinds of different things, and it is free of charge. So they offer unbiased financial advice at no charge to you. So hopefully you can take advantage of that. Our presenter today is Sheri. You may recognize her as she's previously shared information with us. She has been a credit counselor with Money Mentors for 5 years. With a background in social work and coaching, she's heard a variety of situations people have found themselves in, and she's done a lot of coaching with clients. Helping people is in her DNA. She spent 2.5 years as an employment counselor and working with immigrants in Fort McMurray. And I look forward to your presentation, Sheri, because I think, you know, at this moment, money is king. We all need money. We need to know, how do we spend it? How do we save it? And so I'm looking forward to hearing the advice that you have to offer. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be part of this kind of building financial resiliency, which I think is a part of life for everybody. And the topic that we're covering today is balancing unstable income. Okay, so most of my time is spent counseling people one-on-one. I'm not necessarily fabulous with the technology, so I hope that things go well today for us. And I'm going to be weaving a lot of stories that clients tell me when I'm working with them one-on-one into a lot of my presentation. So we'll get started. Balancing unstable income. So what we're going to be covering today is going to include what is income volatility, reasons for changes in income, how to average your income, budgeting guidelines and examples, budgeting tips, information about credit and debt, and savings tips as well. Income volatility. What is income volatility? It's a big change in income from one period to another. It includes income that is inconsistent, meaning that income is not received on a regular, predictable basis, for example, contract income. It also includes income that is unstable, meaning that the hours worked vary considerably each period. So you have people who do seasonal work, people that do shift work, people who might have a lot of overtime for certain months of the year and then be off, and sometimes on EI for other months of the year. And significant changes to income from one month to another absolutely affect financial well-being. Income volatility can happen to anyone. And believe me, I see that every day. And although it's related to job security, there are absolutely differences between the two. Because income volatility is a change in income from one period to another, whereas job security is a change in job status. And I think with COVID and a lot of stuff that goes on for people and economic changes, income volatility is a part of the Alberta landscape for sure. And for the purposes of this presentation, we're looking at income volatility only and not job security. So what are some of the reasons for changes in income? We've got labor market changes, again, affected by the state of the economy. So some examples of this include job loss, self-employment, changes in employment and seasonal work, changes in working hours, and demand for work in certain industries. And the biggest reason for income volatility is labor market changes. We also have non-labor market changes. And this is stuff that sometimes people, I find, forget to plan for. For example, changes in public benefits or transfer payments, such as EI changes, social assistance. Sometimes people are used to receiving or do receive an annual lump sum income tax. And there's also changes in eligibility for benefits. And I've seen this quite a bit when people forget that when their children turn 18, for example, they're not going to receive the Canada Child Benefit anymore. Or if they have young children who are getting older, that income drops as well. There's also household composition changes, such as marriage or divorce. Divorce is a very common reason for people coming to see me. We also have birth and death, and the aging of parents. Possible effects to changes in income: stress, anxiety, and poor health. I think the most important thing I want you to take away from this is absolutely in this, you are not alone. Everyone at some point goes through money insecurities during their lifetime. And that's where the concept of resiliency and finding ways to improve your mental health come into play. And so I'm really hoping that today's presentation can maybe give you some concrete steps to take in relation to building that financial resiliency. There's also late fees and penalties on bills that are common. Use of costly credit. I see this on a regular basis, and it's very common for me to do budgets with people and gather debt information, and they've reached the point where they are using very, very high interest rate lenders. Food insecurities and unable to meet basic needs. Income volatility poses serious emotional and mental health issues for people when they become preoccupied with just meeting their basic needs. And believe me, I have to tell people all of the time that meeting their basic needs, especially medical needs and prescription needs, I regularly have people telling me that they are not buying their prescriptions because of their debts or things going on. And that's something that I come back to, is a prescription is a part of a basic need. Housing instability. Constantly moving, trying to qualify for a mortgage, keeping up with mortgage payments. I think, we've all heard of what's going on during the pandemic with homes and some of the craziness there. And sometimes access to safety net programs is complicated by income volatility, because those receiving benefits are usually required to report changes in income immediately, or risk losing or having to repay benefits that they're receiving. So keeping benefit providers updated can become a full-time job itself. And sometimes those brief high income months can lead to loss in benefits. So in terms of kind of the key, I think, to looking at income vulnerability, and one of the first steps has to do with averaging your income. So what can people do to manage unpredictable income? So in order to get started, the first thing you need to do is figure out your average income, okay? And you do that by reviewing your pay stubs or your tax return to get a better picture of your average income, kind of tracking your hours worked. And I know it can seem like quite a bit of work, but it's really important. And it's kind of the key, I think, to all of this. And when I do budgets with people, I usually base it on their average monthly income. Then the key is to have what we call a checking account. And that is where you deposit your actual paycheck, your benefits, and any other income that you have. Now, this term savings account is actually more of a holding account. So during this presentation, you might find me using the word holding account more. This isn't the kind of emergency savings that this is referencing. What you need to do is those months when you have higher than average income, once you've gone through and figured out your average income, you put that extra into a holding account. And then for the months where your income is lower, you withdraw from that. Okay, so that's a little bit different than typical budgeting that I discussed in my prior presentation, or that a lot of people do. But it's the concept of first develop, figure out your average income, and then you're going to have an account to pay your bills out of that, and then you're going to have a holding account as well. So when it comes to doing that budget, last time I talked, we developed a lean, talked about people developing a lean budget for just basic needs. In this kind of a situation, when you're looking at your overall life and long term, I recommend that you develop for yourself a more reasonable living budget. And this life pie chart is the idea that you want to kind of look at what percentage of your income goes to certain things. This is just a guideline. Okay, it's not a must follow, but this is a guideline to making sure that you have balance in your finances. So this chart assumes that there are costs associated with each category, okay? But that may not always be the case for people, okay? So for example, 35% of your income should be towards housing, and that needs to include your rent or your mortgage, and also looking at your taxes, your utilities, your insurance, and general maintenance. When I do budgets with people, our budgets actually, once we're all done, break down into percentages, different categories. And, you know, I often find that we go up to 40% for lots of people on the housing, just so you know. But certainly when you get into numbers higher than that, it makes managing the rest of your life difficult. So I think it is important to take an overall look at the cost of housing especially. 15% towards transportation. This includes your car payments, your gas, repairs, insurance, parking, if you use other types of transit, regular vehicle maintenance. Often people forget to include things like switching out winter tires. There's also vehicle registration every year that we put into our budgets. And I often ask people about speeding tickets. Because I know whenever I go to pay, my husband always has, unfortunately, lots of photo radar, and I have had a few over the years. And if that's something people consistently have, not that that isn't something that can change, but if you do, it's important to sometimes budget for that. I get a lot of phone calls from people. And just had one last week from a gentleman wanting to look at our debt repayment program specifically for his speeding ticket fines. And unfortunately, those are debts that cannot be part of a debt repayment program through the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act and allow a person to still renew their license. So if that is something that is a regular part of life, it's important that you even look at that in terms of a budget if you're not willing to change your driving habits. 10% towards savings or investing if possible. 10% towards debt repayment, okay, is kind of where you want to be at. Again, it's not always there for everybody, but hopefully you're planning to try to be at that point. 5% donations or family obligations. Again, this is not a must for everybody. I just know that there are many people who, through their church, do tithing, and that's considered a non-negotiable. There are also many, many people who send money to family in other countries or help out family members regularly, and that's almost a non-negotiable as well. And sometimes that amount will be higher. So again, this is just a guideline, okay, and not a must. 25% towards life, so that would be everything from groceries, entertainment, medical, childcare. Like I said, this is a guideline, kind of a generic guideline. I tell people all the time, your budget is an opportunity, if you have enough money to do some moving around, it's an opportunity to design your life and put in what is important to you. So it's not that you have to follow this. These are just kind of general guidelines to help you try to have a bit of a balanced budget, okay? The problem occurs for people when we have a higher percentage in one area, but no room to borrow from another area of our life pie chart. So for example, someone who overspends in housing, for an example, they've got 50% of their income on housing, is going to have problems making ends meet in other areas of their budget, such as making their car payments, having enough money for food or prescriptions, okay? They would either need to find a way to lower their housing costs through downsizing possibly, or living with somebody, or they're going to end up using debt to make up the difference. And this is what I see on a regular basis. A typical client for me was a woman I spoke with, probably 3 days ago. We did a Zoom call, and she has a good income. And she had, actually through a pension from a job she worked at for many years. But she also was working as well up until COVID hit. And then was laid off and not rehired. And we did her budget up, and her housing was at about 54% of her income, and she does have a very reasonable income. When we were going through and doing the budget, she'd already cut back significantly on her groceries and other areas of her life. She does have a car payment, but it's reasonable, and she plans on driving that car for as many years as she can. But she started to cry when we went through her spending on a gym membership. And, when I explored that a little bit more, she said that that was so important to her mental health, and that she knew I was going to tell her she had to stop that. And I let her know absolutely I wasn't going to tell her that. Again, she was willing to make cuts in other areas and do stuff so that she wouldn't have to cut that, and she was willing to make other changes to her life, including possibly selling her home. We talked about her taking in a roommate. We also talked about a timeline for her of how long she kind of had before she would have to look at something like selling her home. Just because it was taking so much of her income. And so for her, I really focused, as I do with most clients, on you have to prioritize what is most important to you. And that is different for everybody. I have lots of clients who are adamant that they will not sell their home. I have a client I'm working with right now on our debt repayment program. He pays a lot towards insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, and everything. Has a young family, and he said that for him is a non-negotiable. He will sell his home and he will give up everything else in his life so that he can keep making that payment. And so when we did his first budget and looked at the overall situation, and he's having to use our debt repayment program just so he can get his debts down to where we're at, keeping that in there is important. And I said to him, your income has to go up. And he goes, I've been thinking I have to return to working on the tools. I don't want to, but I'm willing to. And so by our next conversation, just based upon him actually having to look at the budget and being forced into a position because he's receiving civil lawsuit for some debts, he said, I'm starting a new job in November, and I'm back on the tools. So there are decisions to make, and I want you to know that everybody is different and unique. And this is a guideline, but I really want you to know that if this isn't what makes you happy, the most important thing is that you come up with a life pie chart designed for you, okay, that will allow, though, for all these areas of your life. So in terms of looking, though, at unstable income, we're going to go through a couple of examples of what I chatted about earlier, which is that checking account and that holding account. So here's somebody who's working year-round. Okay, Megan works on call as an administrative assistant through a temp agency. She makes $20 per hour plus overtime for any time over 40 hours a week. She works year-round, but her hours are not guaranteed. And she's not paid if she's not working, so no sick pay and no holiday time off. She's also paid weekly by her temp agency. So if you look at her income, you'll see quite the fluctuation there. And those, over a year, 4 times where she didn't have any income. But her average income over the 52 weeks of that year was $622 per week. Her highest income was $1,400 per week, which occurred twice. as well, and then that low income that we've already mentioned. Only 2 weeks out of the year did she actually earn her average income. So I think you can see how this makes it difficult to budget. So what does she need to do? How is she going to make ends meet? Okay. First of all, having a starter emergency fund is a great idea for people, especially for those unexpected expenses, and can give peace of mind, okay? If it's not an option to have that available immediately, then if you can build that starter emergency fund into a budget, that would be wonderful. That is separate from that holding account. This is an actual emergency fund. Okay, she needs to determine her average weekly income, which we said is going to be that $622 per week. And then she needs to maintain a lifestyle that matches her average weekly income. So she's going to have to develop a budget that is going to be based upon that average weekly income. And then have that checking and that holding account to manage that income. Okay, so anytime she makes more than that average weekly income, she puts it into that holding account. And when she makes less, she withdraws from that holding account. So Megan's pie chart is slightly modified from the sample one that I gave earlier, again, based upon her life. She's taking the full 5% from giving because she's not doing that right now. It's not her priority, and putting it into housing. So she's bumping herself up from 35 to 40%. She's right now lowering her savings by 5% and using it for life expenses. When her financial situation changes, she might increase her savings. She might choose to set money aside for giving, but she might not, because again, that might not be part of how she wants to spend her money. And she might also choose to allocate less to life expenses. Again, our life changes as we go through life all of the time, and our priorities change. So reviewing our priorities and our goals and our budgets as well isn't something that you do and it stays the same. It's fluid and it changes. So she now has an average monthly income then of $2,488. So she's going to base her budget upon that, okay? And then those months where she does make more, like I said, she's going to put that into her holding account. So if she has a month where she makes less, she will draw from that holding account. So when I budget with clients, I do budgets that are based on months. So for her, we would try to do a budget and a life that would be based on $2,488 of income. Example number 2 is something very common to Alberta, seasonal work. So we've got Mike, the heavy equipment operator, working basically 7 months of the year. When he's working, he makes $27 per hour plus overtime for anything over 40 hours a week. His work depends on good weather, opportunity for lots of overtime, and the usual seasonal kind of shutdowns for spring breakup and all of that kind of stuff that is very common in Alberta. For months that he's not working, he qualifies for EI, but we know that EI is significantly less than what he is bringing home, typically. And again, he's not paid if he is not working. There is no sick pay. So for Mike, again, looking at the graph, you can see how volatile his income is. His average weekly income turns out to be $900 per week. His highest weekly income is $1,688 per week. Okay. And believe me, I see many people, especially many younger people, who have a budget based upon that highest income, or have a, I wouldn't say have a budget, they probably don't have a budget, they have a lifestyle that's based upon that higher income. And that is what leads to lots of problems. So, you know, I really try to work with them on the concepts of this unstable income. Mike's lowest weekly income is $550 per week. During the year, he only had 1 week where he actually earned his average income again. And again, when laid off, he qualifies for $500 per week EI. One thing, and I'm sure that many people are aware of this, but EI does have a clawback. So if your income from all sources is greater than the amount allowed for that taxation year, and you begin to receive EI once you're laid off, you may be required to pay back some of the benefits you received when you file your taxes. And certainly because I can deal with Canada Revenue debt, I have definitely put EI overpayment as a debt for many people. And it's really something that people need to kind of plan for and take into account as well. So for Mike, when this is an example of how he would balance that unstable income. So during week 32, Mike had $700 in his holding account, okay? But he did not work much that week because of poor weather, so he only earned $550. So to bring his average weekly income to what it needs to be, which is $900 per week, he transfers $350 from that holding account to add to his $550 income. So he was planning ahead of time and already had a budget, okay, and was doing the kind of budgeting technique that we're talking about. So he had money put aside for those lower income weeks already. So that has significantly reduced his stress about money when he doesn't get the hours he was expecting. So therefore, at the end of week 32, he now has $350 remaining in that holding account. All right. So then when his income is above average, you know, at week 41, he earned that $1,688 because the weather was great and he worked lots of overtime. So to bring his average weekly income to what it needs to be, which is $900 per week, he now transfers that extra $788 from his checking account, where his money is deposited, into that savings holding account, because he knows that when his income dips down again, he's going to need this money to make ends meet. So now, at the end of week 41, he has $1,108 remaining in that holding account. So Mike's pie chart, again, is modified to his life. He lowered his transportation from the 15% to 10% because he doesn't have a car payment. He bought a used car cash and was able to do that. He's increased his debt repayment from 10% to 15% because he wants to pay off his credit card debt. He's also increased his savings from 10% to 15% because he does not have any retirement matching at work. And he also wants to save to buy a house. So for someone like this, for example, once his consumer debt is paid off, he's going to transfer that 15% that he's currently putting towards saving or investing category. So he's going to bump that up then from 15% to 30% at that time. So then he can focus on saving for a sizable down payment. And that's where, again, working kind of the budget and looking at your overall situation and always planning is so important. So when you're looking at income sources as well, besides income, there's also benefits. Benefits can be ongoing or they can be a one-time thing. If the benefit is paid out regularly, for example, the Canada Child Benefit, okay, then it's a lot easier to forecast and include in your budget. Like I said, though, if it's going to be changing because of the age of your children, or a change to family composition, then you really want to plan for that. A one-time payment of a tax refund, which can be unpredictable, can be excluded from the calculation of average income. Okay, and there are certain things like that that you kind of want to look at as more of a windfall income. So if you have an unstable income, you might not always receive that Canada Revenue income tax refund. So you look at it a little bit different and put it into your budget separately if you put it in at all. It might be for the fun kind of stuff instead. How drastic your employment income fluctuates. If you've got a lot of spikes and dips that are so frequent that they make determining your benefit amount unpredictable, then again, you might want to consider making the benefit a windfall income, which means that you don't include it in your average calculation of your income. So when you're looking at your benefits and include whether you're going to include them or not as part of your income, or not include them and consider them more a windfall, you want to be mindful of a few things. Income thresholds, which is the income cutoff in which you no longer are eligible for the benefit. What's called a benefit cliff, which is a sudden drop. And I've already touched upon that, receiving that Canada Child benefit, and then it ends when your child turns 18. But most 18-year-olds are still living at home, and the costs haven't necessarily dropped for them. As well, when people get married, their combined income might be too high to qualify for certain benefits. You might also have a benefit spike, and that's kind of that windfall where you're entitled to that large tax refund and things like that. Phasing out of benefits, and that is similar to what we already talked about with the benefit cliff, but phasing out is more where your child is turning 6 and your Canada Child benefit is going to be reduced, or your employment income is steadily increasing, so you're not going to receive those GST credits again that you've come to rely upon. So you really want to be aware of those potential benefit changes. And if you're not sure of those changes or how to plan for them, there is a resource called benefitsfinder.com that you can look at. And then the Alberta government at alberta.ca also has some information about that. So budgeting tips. What are some budgeting tips for dealing with income volatility? So when you are doing your budget, okay, first of all, you need to be honest with yourself. First of all, about what you have been spending, but also about distinguishing between needs and wants, because it's going to absolutely help you prioritize what to spend money on when finances are tight. Do not spend more than your average income when you are designing a budget. And we've chatted about that already. That's going to allow you to have that regular checking account and that holding account. If you are living a life that's based on a higher income than your average income, then eventually you're going to be using debt or juggling debt to manage your life, which I see all of the time, until the point where you can't juggle anymore, or the creditors aren't going to let you do that anymore. So please, if possible, before you get to that point, that's where you want to have a budget that works for the type of income you have. And when you have that unstable income, it does take more work to do that. If you're in a tight month and you haven't done that planning ahead of time, then you need to quickly cut back on discretionary spending. okay? And that includes things like eating out, your hobbies, your vacations. That's developing more of a lean budget. And it might be that you need to have a bit of a lean budget to get you started until you're back to making more money. And then you want to have the budget for an actual life budget based upon more of that pie chart that we've been talking about this time, okay? Grow your emergency fund. Continue always to grow your starter emergency fund into a fully funded one, because life emergencies always happen. Despite how much planning you do and budgeting, they absolutely happen. And please limit the cost of fixed expenses, because the more fixed expenses you have in your budget, the less room you have to make quick changes should your income drop and you don't have that holding account with money in it. Examples of fixed expenses include house payments, car payments. Just because you qualify for a car loan doesn't mean you can afford it. So you really need to do some pre-planning before you make that purchase. Also, buy now, pay later payments. I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail later, but those end up costing people a lot of money, and quite often the pay later doesn't happen. It's something that we're talked into at that time because they want us to buy. So what are some things that you can do as a budgeting kind of tip? Split your bill payments for your fixed expenses. So you split it across pay periods. This helps to free up cash for each paycheck. So instead of paying the full bill amount at once, you split it into equal pay periods for the month. So for example, your cell phone bill of $70 is due at the end of each month. If you get paid bi-weekly, budget to pay $35 each pay period until the bill is paid. And in that resource that is attached, that Stretch Your Dollars Budgeting Basics booklet that you have, it is wonderful. Besides a lot of tips, it's actually got a full page of paycheck planning, is what we call it. And that's where you look at how much money from each paycheck you're going to put on all of your bills. So I think it's page 13 and 14 of that Stretch Your Dollars Budgeting Basics booklet is a paycheck planner. So by doing this, you're going to free up cash each paycheck, avoid missing bill payments, and reduce the need to match your bills with each pay period. So you want to list all of your fixed expenses and divide them over the pay periods in a month. And then again, as part of that paycheck planning. One tip as well is for bills that may fluctuate over the month. You may want to pay a little extra if possible on each bill so that it carries you over for the following month. So for example, paying an additional $100 on your utility bill every few months can help, so that when we go to minus 30 or minus 40, you might have a little bit extra there. I really do encourage people, if possible, to look at equalization payments for your utility payments, but I know that you have to be all up to date to do that. And there's a certain time of year when they will start that. But it can really help with that budgeting. So in terms of some actual budgeting tips, use cash to manage spending for variable expenses. A lot of people, you know, you have watched those shows on TV and there's the jars and the envelope system. I think during COVID as well, using gift cards was another kind of way of using cash. But especially for entertainment and clothing, eating out is a huge one. I have lots of clients who don't know what they spend on eating out, and they take a best guess, and they'll throw a number at me for their monthly amount. And then they'll go, okay, maybe $100 a month. And I go, okay, so that's $25 a week. And then they'll go, and then they'll start telling me, I go, tell me what you spend in a typical week. And I'll just add it up for them as we go through, and it will be significantly higher. So when you are developing your budget, it's really good, if you don't have one, to look back, if possible, at the last 3 months of spending. But for sure, you want to use 1 month if it was a typical month for you. But sometimes it's good to look at a little bit longer. I don't think you need to go through the past year. That's just way too much work for anybody. But if you can go through your spending and be honest with yourself, it will really help you develop that budget. Using gift cards for gas and groceries again. And I have one client that we just chatted a couple days ago, and we're going through everything, and we had to say he has to stop shopping at the gas station because that's where a lot of his extra spending goes. And for him, it just has to be that he doesn't even set foot inside that gas station. Groceries can be a little bit tricky right now, especially. I mean, inflation, unfortunately this morning, the news said inflation is at an 18-year high. And I get that, right? We're buying groceries and they're all going up. But that's why it's really important that we are revisiting our budgets and being realistic, because groceries is a need, it's not a want. There are absolutely changes that could be made to a budget. I do lots of budgets for single people that are super frugal, and we'll look at maybe what used to be $300 a month for groceries is now maybe $350 a month for groceries. You know, I did a budget yesterday with someone who's frugal in many areas, but she buys all organic and fresh, and walks to a lot of farmers markets and places like that in her neighborhood. So we actually went through, she didn't know what she spent on groceries. She had no idea. So again, she went through the last month and we added it up, and she's spending $550 a month on groceries. And she said to me, is that a lot? And I said, it's not a lot for somebody who buys like you do, but it certainly is more than a lot of people who are being really frugal. And again, I said, it's your choice. If it's important to you that that is how you eat and how you shop, then you need to adjust the rest of your life to manage that. But the only way that you can do that is if you actually know what you are spending, okay? Have a separate checking account for variable expenses. So I know that there can be lots of accounting here, and again, it depends upon what you need. Sometimes people have two checking accounts. One is for all of their fixed expenses that have to come out, right? All of those needs and all of their pre-authorized payments. And then the other might be for variable expenses. And that way they know where they're at with their spending. And if it's a variable expense, when that money is gone, then it is gone and there is no more spending in that category. Other people will put in a certain amount for eating out, and they have certain places they always go through, whether it's their Timmy's or something like that. And it's a matter of, okay, when that money is gone, and sometimes it might even be buying that gift card for Tim Hortons. You load your amount for those 2 weeks, or you load your amount for that month. And when it's done, it is done. Keeping credit cards at home so that we're not making those impulsive decisions. You know, giving ourselves then, for some clients, and many clients who've been successful on our debt repayment program, tell me that they've implemented things for themselves like a 72-hour purchase rule, and that usually they forget about what they wanted to buy 72 hours later, and they don't need it. And I've tried that, and it works really well, because when I'm in the store, even though I have good intentions, I see something, and I've walked around before with that blouse going, this is so pretty, I love the color, and then justifying it for myself. I don't have anything in this color. But I had imposed a rule on myself. So then when I put it back, sadly, and went home, discovered that yes, I do have something in that color I completely forgot about, and my life is no worse off without that blouse. But again, you need to really know yourself. You need to know what is successful for you. You need to know your strengths, and you also need to know your triggers and your weaknesses so that you can build on your strengths and try to eliminate those triggers. And that might be keeping your credit cards at home, using cash just for very specific things, not allowing yourself to do any online shopping. Tracking expenses. So now you've gone and you've looked at a budget. You've looked at your life pie chart, so you've kind of set your goals. Now you need to work it all, and that is by tracking, because otherwise it's just all a piece of paper that might sit on your fridge. So you actually need to do it, and that requires living it and tracking it, because that will confirm that the numbers in your budget are accurate and let you know if you need to make changes. Again, the envelope system for cash is one option that helps you determine where your cash goes. Because if you're always withdrawing and you don't have a clue where it's being spent, it's really hard to have a real budget and a realistic one. You want to review your bank and your credit card statements. And the biggest variable expense that most people overspend on is food. Budgeting apps. Most banks have apps nowadays. This works best if you only have one bank, though, where you manage your finances, or especially that checking account where you're doing your spending out of. Mint.com is a popular app that allows you to track spending from multiple banks. And it also has other features like the ability to track your net worth over time. Every Dollar is an app that requires you to enter how much you spend after each transaction. The reason behind this is that people are more likely to watch their spending if they have to actively track it throughout the month and enter the data. The budgets that I do with clients and then email them actually has tracking sheets attached so that people can track day 1 through 31 of their spending and under each category. We also show people how to track their annual spending as well, which is stuff that you don't spend on every month, but you spend on every year. And it really should be part of a budget. So again, when it comes to doing your budget, that Budgeting Basic Stretch Your Dollars workbook has samples in it of how to do a budget. Money Mentors on our website, we also have a budgeting course, and by the time you finish it, which maybe takes an hour and a half or so, you will have a budget. And it's also something that you can do an appointment with a counselor such as me. I do budgets with people all of the time. And then email it out so you've got it. So credit and debt, especially if you have that volatile income, it's often a lot of people have that unstable income, and it's resulted in some credit and debt for them, and they come to see me. So comparing the cost of credit. Interestingly enough, when I was driving to work this morning, listening to my favorite radio station that makes me laugh because it's a lot of talking and people texting in with really funny hosts, the topic they were discussing had to do with the cost of credit, because the host had read an article about a woman in Ontario who purchased a laptop a few years ago for $700. A few years ago, 7 years ago. She is still paying on it, has been paying on it, and that $700 laptop has now cost her over $3,000. And so people were texting in with all kinds of stories, again, about that buy now, pay later thing. And then they were phoning in about vehicle payments and stuff like that as well. So on a regular basis, I see this cost of credit as an issue for people. So for example, if you spend $1,000 cash or debit, it costs you $1,000. There's no interest or fees. If you put it on your credit card and you pay your credit card in full that month, again, there's no interest or fees, and the total cost of the item is $1,000. If you put it on your credit card and you make minimum payments with, that 19.99% interest that lots of people have, and make minimum payments over 10 years, you are going to pay just in interest and fees over $1,100. And that $1,000 item is now costing you $2,104.63 to purchase. So before you buy something on credit and know that you're just going to make minimum payments, it's really worth you thinking, is this item worth more than double what I paid? Now you get to the buy now, pay in 1 year stuff that lots of places do. And again, I see this all the time and put these kind of debts on our debt repayment program all of the time. If you pay that balance in full on time for that $1,000 item, there's probably a $50 setup fee. So it will cost you $1,050. But if you pay that balance in full and just 1 week late, that contract is written up in the fine print that you don't read in detail and isn't gone through in detail with you because you've been sold on this fabulous 0% interest and you can pay in a year. You pay it 1 week late, 28% from date of purchase. You're going to pay still your setup fee and now a little bit more than $373 in interest. So now paying 1 week late is that $1,000 item is now $1,423. And I'm sure it's depreciated as well in value. Buy now, pay in 1 year, but you're just going to start making your monthly payments after that year, which is what a lot of people do. That $1,000 item is now going to cost you interest of over $1,200 plus the setup fee. So you're now spending $2,252.69. So those buy now, pay in 1 year is actually the most expensive if you do something like this. It's even worse than your credit card. So in terms of managing credit, now, okay, that you know that the type of debt you have and how quickly you pay it down makes a big difference on the total cost of borrowing. You want to go through and have a plan in your budget for managing your credit. So as I said at the beginning, please prioritize paying for food, shelter, transportation, and medicine above anything else. Whether you're making a lot of money or barely getting by, okay, you need to meet your basic human needs because that will allow you to focus on other things like finding suitable work, okay? Know what you can afford. So before you accept any kind of credit, review your budget to know what you can afford and give yourself plenty of margin in the event of a prolonged drop of income. Again, just because you are approved for financing has nothing to do with affordability. It has everything to do with that lender making money off of you. So whether it's a big purchase or a small purchase, you need to walk in ahead of time knowing what you can afford to make as a payment. If possible, avoid using credit for things that go down in value. Okay, now I know, vehicles go down, but most people do end up needing to use credit for a vehicle purchase, knowing that hopefully it's going to be paid off within a reasonable time and you're going to keep it for that time. Be very, very careful with vehicles, and going in and doing a trade-in for another vehicle at what they're going to tell you is a more reasonable payment, because you are taking negative equity with you from that trade-in, and sometimes you get yourself into a position where you can't get out of it. And again, this morning, one of the guys that phoned into the radio station said he had just come out of bankruptcy and had poor credit. So he ended up buying a vehicle with a sticker price of $38,000 at a ridiculously high interest rate. He's got 6 more months of payments and then he's done on this vehicle. And he said for that $30,000 vehicle, he has paid, by the time he's done, $76,000 to pay for that vehicle. He goes, I'm driving this until I can't drive it anymore. And at the time, you know, that's the choice that he made. So really be aware of the real cost of borrowing. And whenever possible, access the lowest cost credit. So shop around for the lowest rate. Avoid payday loans. And, you know, unless it comes down to meeting your absolute basic needs and you have to do something like that. But if you do, then I recommend, if you're in a payday loan cycle, that you book an appointment with Money Mentors Counselor to review everything, because they make that a cycle that's really hard to get out of. When your income is higher, right, if you have that unstable income, make more than the minimum payments. And one way to do that is actually using your high income earning months to reduce the debt with the highest interest rate. Okay, it's called rolling down debt. You also want to always pay bills that report to the credit bureau in full, and get up to date on bills by cutting unnecessary spending. Setting up a debt repayment plan with your creditors is also something that you can do as well. Many people don't realize that this is an option, but it absolutely is for many people. And the first step when you think that you're in trouble is to approach your creditors. Again, mark your payment due dates on a calendar. Allow for processing time. Client I spoke with yesterday, who had been really struggling with his debt repayment program, has been doing much better lately. And he said that he started having to, he goes, I've just taken charge. I've got out a calendar, I've got my budget, Sheri, and I'm planning, and I have to make this a priority. And it's something he didn't do before. And it was leading him to lots of problems, including potentially being defaulted off of our debt repayment program. So he really has taken that organizing to the level that's required. Okay, and again, figure out the total price you're paying before you get credit. Avoid using credit to solve short-term problems if you can. It may seem like a good idea at the time, but it can lead to an absolute mountain of debt. Sometimes difficult decisions need to be made. Selling and downsizing assets to reduce monthly payments. And I have had to recommend that to clients in the past before. And again, it's up to them what their priorities are, but it's something that sometimes, due to lots of reasons, needs to be a consideration. Okay, and again, we are here to help you do all of this and do an assessment if you need that. So rolling down your debts. Mentioned it briefly before. The main idea with this is that you're making the minimum payment on all of your debts, and anything over and above this amount that you can do, you're going to put on one debt at a time, which will be the highest interest rate debt. So when you do your budget and you allocate that percentage or that monthly amount toward debt repayment, If you can do more than the minimum payment on your debts, which is something you need to do if you want to be debt-free, you put the extra that you can do towards the highest interest rate debt first. So for example, this would be the department store credit card. So the snowball method is where you've got that extra money every month, right? This person can manage minimum payments on everything plus an extra $75 towards the debt with the highest interest rating. So they're going to put that on that department credit card. Then when that department credit card is paid off, they then take all of that payment that they were making and they now add that payment to their next highest debt. So our website has a calculator on it that will let you calculate how long it will take you to get out of debt based upon this method. You just need to go through and make a list of all of your debts, the rate that you are paying on them, the interest rate, and the minimum payment. And then you have to have your budget with how much you can afford to pay each month, okay? The biggest thing though is that this assumes you're not using debt as you're paying it off. And again, that requires a perspective of you are going to have a budget with cash, preferably, and if not, that you're going to be transferring money onto your credit card every month as you pay for that expense in your budget, and that you're not actually increasing your debt. So the Orderly Payments of Debt program that we call OPD is something that we administer to people if they have been really struggling and are not able to reduce their debts on their own. It's exclusive to us. We're actually in the legislation because it's a legislated debt repayment program that lets people pay all of their unsecured debts. So that's not a vehicle or not a mortgage. Lots of people phone me about wanting to change your vehicle payments, and those are not options within the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. Secure debts, you cannot change the payments on unless you work with the lender yourself. But the OPD program lets you pay back unsecured debt at a 5% interest rate with legal protection from creditors. It's a consolidation of all of your unsecured debt, so it's one monthly payment. It is not a loan. It's a structured debt repayment program that you have every legal right to use if your debt has reached the point, potentially because you have an unstable income, or potentially because of a permanent change to income, and you're not going to be able to manage on your own. Okay, it does have a negative effect on your credit rating, and you're not allowed unsecured credit while you're doing it. But it's absolutely something that we assist clients with all of the time. And there's no rules regarding income or assets when it comes to this program. So savings tips, especially when you have that unstable income. Using apps. These are apps that, truthfully, I'm not familiar with. I haven't used them. I would love it, though, if those of you who do use apps could maybe put in the chat box what some of those apps are that you use and find helpful. So, you know, we could look at that being shared with everybody. You know, Groupon, actually, you just have to sometimes be careful about what you're buying and make sure that you read the rules and restrictions of each purchase before you do that, especially. But I think there's a lot of apps, new ones and good ones, coming all the time. I'm just not an app person, so I'm not familiar with them, but that's where I would love some feedback that could be shared with everybody if you use apps to save money. Keep housing costs low. And I know people feel that this is out of their control, but it's the biggest monthly expense for most households. 30 to 35%. Sometimes, like I said, I can see it managing up to 40%. If you get much higher than that, it's really, really difficult to have a budget that makes any sense, especially if you have debt. Ways to do that are to share accommodation with others, to look at affordable housing programs, and rent supplement programs. And people need, again, to be really honest with themselves about that house, and if they can afford it, and kind of what priorities are. Doing a detailed budget is a really good eye-opener for people to see the actual costs of that and plan before you get into that situation. Because again, just because you're approved for a mortgage at a certain level doesn't mean that you can afford it. Reducing your grocery bill through meal planning, shopping weekly to avoid overspending and waste. Again, using apps and flyers. Keep track as you shop. Never grocery shop hungry. Shop with a list. You know, people are now substituting a lot of protein items for meat, and sometimes shopping online as well for groceries. Contacting service providers, especially when it comes to things like cable, internet, and cell phones. See if you can bundle. You know, looking at promotional deals. There's a lot of that people do. Switching providers if your contract is up. You can also ask to adjust your bill payment cycle to fit your pay. Again, if you're doing that paycheck planning, which is in our Stretch Your Dollars budgeting book. So basically, in conclusion, income volatility is growing, and I think, you know, pandemic especially, you really need to look at that average income, people, please, to make budgeting and planning easier. And then you have to have a budget, and just be mindful of changes and look at using that life pie chart as a starting point when you are budgeting. And that is it for the presentation. I've got some time for questions. I'm just going to stop sharing. There. Are we good? Oops. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm not unmuted. Oh,
here we go.
Okay. So thank you. That was really informative, and you've given me a lot of food for thought personally also, because I do have, as a self-employed contractor, I do have that not constant income. So thank you for bringing up all of those ideas. I do want to remind our audience that Money Mentors does offer free, unbiased financial advice at no charge. So if you, you know, you might even just have a few questions you want answered, give them a call, email, send them, you know, send them a text, whatever. And
no, please phone and book an appointment with the counselor.
Okay, no text allowed. Okay. So we do have some really great questions here. One question is, how often should we be reviewing and adjusting our budgets? Is this like a weekly, a monthly, yearly?
There's a lot of factors that go into that. And again, part of what we're like and our personalities will determine that. So I work with lots of couples, and there might be one person who is, you know, wants to take charge of that and sit down and do it regularly, do the tracking all the time. You know, I'll say to people, okay, do you guys want to set a date night once a month? Do you want to set that to review kind of things and where you're at? How often do you need to? We're all at different life stages, so it's really hard, right? Because there's changes that happen, not just to our income that we've touched upon, but to our lives as well. So I think at least if things are going fabulous, I do think sitting down at least once a year, right? Oh. And most of us aren't here because things are going fabulous. But if they are, at least sitting down every year and reviewing, because if we set our goals every year, then our budget can reflect those goals. And there's always different things that we might want to put into our budget. But if we have that unstable income, or there's changes, or we're stressed, we may need to do that definitely more often.
Okay, thank you. When you are doing your budget and creating your pie chart, how do you determine what percentage you are actually spending in each section? So I think you kind of mentioned about looking back over your spending habits.
Yes. Yes, you have to track what you have been spending, and put that into your budget. And then you compare that to your income. So if you have an income of $2,000 a month, take home income. Okay, this is net income, take home. And you are spending $500 a month on groceries. You're spending 25% of your income. The only way you know that you're spending $500 a month on groceries is if you've been tracking what you're spending, or you go back and look at the last 3 months and see, oh, this is the average that I've spent.
Okay, I'm one of those people that don't go in with a list. I've got one thing and then I walk out with 20. So I'm going to be conscious of that. Yes. How do we know what bills are reported to the credit bureau? So what affects our credit rating?
So two things I want to say. First, we have a wonderful course that I think everybody in the world should take called Credit Cross Training. It's for free. It's on our website, a free online course that explains exactly how credit rating and credit score works. Essentially, though, in terms of bills, any type of credit you have, from credit cards to loans to lines of credit, that's all reporting every month. In terms of your cell phone, it reports every month as well. Utility bills for your house do not report, for example, EPCOR or that kind of stuff. They don't report unless they get closed, and because they're you haven't paid, and then they'll go into collections. Then that will show up as well. So there's some debts that don't always report regular, but if they do get closed and go to collections, even library fines, Alberta Health Services unpaid ambulance bills, that will show up in collections on your credit report eventually. But yeah, that kind of stuff. Anything in collections that the creditor is updated will report. But always your installment loans, right? A consolidation loan, vehicle loan, that kind of stuff reports every month.
Okay, and I have to say, Calgary, we do not have library late fees, so we're pretty lucky that way. Okay, what about student debt? How does that fit in?
I'm sorry, fit into
sorry.
budget?
Yeah, or how does it get reported if you aren't up to date? Do they send it to collection officers?
Yes.
It just says student debt, so I'm just kind of faking it.
So that depends again. If it's government debt, okay, if it's government student loan debt that you get behind on, so yes, it does report, first of all. And it depends who it's through. For, let's say, Alberta, we've got Alberta student loans and Canada student loans. If it gets sent to collections, if you get behind enough for long enough, and try not to, please, there's repayment assistance programs. It's really important that you work with both levels of government on those debts, and don't ignore, because the creditor for Canada student loans that go to collections is Canada Revenue, and they collect on that just like they do any other Canada Revenue debt. And there's a company that most Alberta student loans go to as well for debt collections, and they can be aggressive, and they will engage in collection activities upon people and look at garnishing wages. Again, because we administer a legislated debt repayment program, I deal with government debt all the time. But yeah, don't avoid. If you can, always work with the initial creditor. If you need to look at repayment assistance, it's not going to affect your credit rating negatively. And if it gets to the point where it's in collections, you might want to talk to somebody like myself about that, about the reality of what can happen there.
I've heard that there's more collection of debt quicker. Collection companies are coming after people for smaller amounts than they used to. Is that true?
I don't know statistically, but I'll tell you based on my experience, yes. And I'm seeing amounts, somebody that phoned me in a panic Friday at 4 o'clock, we had an appointment, almost hyperventilating on the phone because he was just served legal paperwork for a debt under, right around $9,000. Very rarely, a few years ago, did we see kind of court stuff for that, but we're absolutely seeing, all counselors, we've been chatting about it, more civil litigation on smaller debts. happening right now. I don't know statistically if that's true or not. That's just based upon my experience.
Okay. So those individuals, though, they can come and talk to you if they do get something like that in the mail.
Absolutely. If it's at the point of legal collection and legal stuff going on, you need to talk to money mentors or an insolvency trustee, because only legislated options can deal with debts that are now legal.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Even judgments and everything.
So the question I've got here is, I've heard that the cost of groceries, cost of gas, cost of home heating, we know that it's all going up. How do we manage that? It says, how much extra do I need to budget to account for this, when we don't actually know what the cost will be in the future?
Yeah. And that's a tough one. I don't know. Again, that's kind of experiential. I'm telling, through me asking people, tracking. So I think what you need to do is track the increased costs and plan, especially for groceries, plan for, I'm going to say 10%. And I'd say, at least that. So I'm doing that in my budgeting with single people, kind of especially. It's hard. And we don't know for sure. But I think it's good that if you're being proactive and putting more in your budget for that, and especially for those utilities, now might be the time, if you're all up to date on utility payments, to look at an equalization payment plan.
Right. It does make your budgeting much easier when you know how much money you're going to spend every month that you've put aside.
Absolutely.
And certainly the gas, things that I'm doing now is I'm not running out every time I think I have to. I'm trying to go out once. So if I have to go to the library, I have to go to the grocery store. So there are those small little ways we can do to kind of accommodate the increase in cost. Yeah, and not speeding. Maybe speeding also takes more gas. I don't know. Okay. My husband tells me it does. Okay.
Oh, it does.
Okay, so looking at some tips, a person has said that they use Flip, and it has tons of sales and flyers on it, and you can search there for your item on there and find it when it's on sale. And I have to say that my niece's partner is one of the Flip people. So I think it's a really good application to use. So anytime you can compare shop, I think it's valuable. So for instance, my daughter sent me what my granddaughter wanted for Christmas. So I went on and I Googled it, and then I found out Best Buy had it on sale for $15 less than, Toys R Us, Walmart, or that. So sometimes just taking that extra moment to compare shop. I think it takes time, but what do we have but time right now? Okay. So, and the last thing is, somebody's saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed with all of this information. What is the easiest way for us to get started?
I think the first thing to do would be to look at what your life is costing you as the first step. And if you need to do that kind of on your own time and slowly, that's okay. We've got the course that can help you work through it. We've got the form in our budgeting booklet if you need to do that. If you are just going to throw in the towel kind of, and that's, and say, I can't do this, phone and book an appointment with someone like me. You phone and we'll do a budget. What you will have to do, though, is a little bit of homework to try to know your spending. Okay. But if it seems overwhelming to you, and I get that it is, you have to chunk it, break it down into chunks. And that first chunk is, let me look at the cost of my life. And that's where I start with people, because they phone me and they are very overwhelmed. So within a 1-hour appointment, I can at least look at the cost of their life, and I can quickly see things for them to think about, and then chunk it into other homework pieces for them to work on with time.
Okay, thank you. I think that it's like with everything in life. If you start with small steps, you will get where you want to go. But you're right. If you take on too much, it can be overwhelming, and then you just give up, and you're not able to move forward. So reminding everyone, there are free services. Use them. I mean, that's what it is. And the last, is the advice the same for all ages?
Yes, the principles are absolutely. The advice is, in terms of the debt piece, sometimes we kind of look at time, right? And is this just a short-term thing, and you've got chances income is going to go up again later if you're a young person, and right, if you're more looking at this income volatility. If you are a senior though, and you've relied upon that second job, and you're now 64 years old or something, and that second job is gone, you may not have the same time to deal with the debts. So the principles of budgeting and planning are important, but the time might be a little bit different there. The reality of what's going to happen within the next year to change this. So that's where, again, talking to somebody unbiased who can explain to you how debt works, especially if it's debt that's an issue, is important, I think.
Okay,
but the principles of budgeting and tracking and living within your means is any age.
It's the same. Okay, and I personally prefer, as a senior almost, mature. So, okay. Thank you so much. As I say, I've learned quite a bit, and so I'm going to start thinking about, what my practices are. So I appreciate that, Sheri, and certainly for those individuals, you will find the link to the resources in the Slido feed. And certainly if you would like any other information, if you go to the Talent Pool website, you can find resources there. So I want to remind people that we do have that poll question where you can win a gift card to spend money. and it will be popping up, and you just need to put in your name, email address, and your answer. And I'll tell you, this was really a giveaway question, so everyone has a fair chance of winning. Just as there is free help to help you with your financial situation, there is also free workshops organized by the government of Alberta. Some of the funding comes from the government of Canada. And so if you are interested in learning how to write an effective resume and job search, there is also a link for that in the Slido, I believe. I happen to be a workshop facilitator, and I'm really happy to report that I've had people that have been unemployed for quite a while, looking for work for months, and all of a sudden people are starting to get employed again in good work. So that makes me hopeful. And I just wanted to mention that we are also having a bilingual job fair on October 27th. You can still register for that. I will be there sharing information about workshops. I wish I was, but I am not bilingual. But I will be able to answer in English. We are also planning future events, and so what we're looking for is some of your suggestions. Is there any topic that you feel will really benefit you in helping you move forward? Certainly my hope would be that you would find employment before, next year. But if not, or if you know other people, what are some of the topics you need information about? It's really important for us to make sure that what we're offering is information that's of value to you. So if you could, we will be sending out a survey, a 90-day survey, and if you could put in some of your suggestions in that, we would very much appreciate it. It will be going out. There'll be one this afternoon, but then also November 18th. You will be getting another one. And we just want to know, how are you doing? Has it been helpful? Is there anything that we can provide in terms of information? So that is it. And I would like to once again thank the Alberta government for funding this series and Compound XP for providing us with the technology. Sheri for providing us with really great information from Money Mentors, and that talent pool staff. You know, Chris and Brendan, all of these wonderful people that are putting together this information, doing your registrations and following up with speakers. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Good luck in your job search. Good luck in your money management. And happy Halloween. It's just down around the corner. And I'm praying we don't get snow and it's not too cold. So take care, everyone. Thank you so much, and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.